So welcome everyone to the PFCC Partners April Workshop. I am very excited to have Marion Moore with me here today. She is the Manager of Patient Experience at Dignity Health, and she's going to be talking to us today about empowering patients, families, and staff to engage, something that I think we are all really interested in hearing about how they do this at Dignity Health, and I think something that a lot of us out in the field are working on, whether we are patients or staff or families. So very excited to get to Marion's presentation in just a moment. But before we get started, I just wanted to give some helpful tips for those who are online on the meeting. You should be able to see my screen and the presentation on your computer. If you hover over your screen, you should be able to find a panel that has some tools to help you access Zoom. So one of those is the mute button that you can find right here. And I would really appreciate if everyone could mute their lines as we get started with Marion's presentations. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I will be managing the chat box throughout Marion's presentation and can bring her any comments or questions when we stop for breaks. We're also going to have some time at the end of the presentation today to open the line and ask for any other questions. So you can jot those down and save them for later if you would like to speak up then. The chat box can be found, again, if you hover over your screen and click chat, or you might need to hit the icon that says more and then locate chat there. So just really quickly at PFCC Partners, our mission is to partner with healthcare organizations like Dignity Health and Marion and the public to provide a collaborative learning community and a learning experience like this, where we share proven methods, successes, and challenges that Marion will talk a little bit about today that really help to guide the development of sustainable patient-family engagement structures across the healthcare continuum. A few ways that we support that mission. I just wanted to share some upcoming things that are going on at PFCC Partners, just a few. I did want to mention our next workshop in May will be Friday, May 25th, same time, same place. And Libby and I, us at PFCC Partners, will be talking about utilizing a tool called Objectives and Key Results for strategic planning of patient-family advisory councils. So another thing we have heard a need from the community for is really how to connect your advisory council to the strategic goals of your organization. So we will be discussing that. I also know that there are a lot of advisors on today and advisory council facilitators. We have an upcoming training. It is the Core Competencies for Effective Partners training. It's a two-part online training where we go through the 5 core competencies of effective partners. And so I will post the link to registration to that in the chat in just a minute or two. But I just wanted to put that out there in case anyone was interested in participating. And if you have questions about either of these, you can put those in chat and I will respond there. But without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my screen and pass it to Marion Moore from Dignity Health, the Manager of Patient Experience. So Marion, take it away.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you all having me Wednesday. It's nothing that's more exciting for me than really connecting on how we can better connect our patients, their families and caregivers to really make people's journey through the caregiver system the best it can possibly be, the way we want it for our own family. So thank you again for being here. And I just want to take a few minutes today to kind of talk about how we have ways to really engage people through our hospital system, from the senior leadership across our middle management to the caregiver at the bedside. And that's where the magic really happens, but it takes the entire team to engage. So we want to talk about the power of that connection. And just first, I'd like to just share a little bit about Dignity Health. Dignity Health is here, covers 22 states, really, where we're engaged with 39 acute care hospitals where we have a lot of patient experience going on. And that actually involves about 62,000 employees and 9,000 physicians. And needless to say, that's a lot of voices to connect with the patient and a lot of people that can make a difference in providing great care. And, you know, it really connects to our ministry and our brand, which is the Hello Human Kindness, really that package of having a human person connect with another person in healing. And it's humanity, really. So, you know, just that's kind of the ministry of Dignity Health, to provide the healing to those that are less fortunate and in need. So that's something we all work together to do. Here at Dignity Health, we felt it was important to really define what it meant when we say patient experience. What's the definition of the patient experience? And of course, the reason that we're all here is about the patient. So the patient is definitely at the center of everything. It's our purpose, and it's also built on our mission, vision, and values. Our values being dignity, collaboration, justice, stewardship, and excellence is near and dear to what we deliver every day. Connected to our vision of being highly effective and providing great care at a cost-effective manner is important. But then we move on to the 3 elements that are most important, and that's the look, need, and feel. Every patient comes to us with a need. And, you know, whether it's a hip replacement or if they're coming in to have a new child, there's a need, and it's inherent when the patient comes that we take care of that need. We pay attention to that need. So when it comes to the patient, they give that feedback, oh my goodness, something is happening, I've fallen, I need to get to a hospital. And when they get to us, the first thing they see is the hospital. How do we look? Do we look welcoming? Do we look like we're capable of caring? Do we look like we are accessible to everyone? And then that feel. Again, do we make you feel welcome, that you're part of our family? Do we feel competent, like you're in good hands, those people that step up and make a difference? And all of that is really kind of surrounded by Hello Human Kindness, caring from the heart. So, you know, that's the way we approach the patient experience, looking at those key elements and making sure that we meet those needs. And then we also were able to develop what we call experience principles. And this came about, it was very interesting. We were able to have patients, families, caregivers across the system, as well as physicians, come together and talk about what it looked like for a patient. What do they need from us? What's important to the patient experience, to actually delivering on all those promises that we make. And it took a little while because it was many people involved, you know, 300 people together takes a little while to bring all the ideas together and kind of filter it to what it needs to be. But we came up with 7, and the most important thing was know me as a person, connect with me, not why I'm here or not what my clinical need is, but who I am. Things like making eye contact with me, communicate with me, let me know what's going on, have that sense of transparency so that I'm part of the decision-making process. And that's part of empowering me. Allow me to be in charge of my care. Let me advocate. And then we come to comfort me. Notice when I'm having difficulty. Notice when I'm having joy. Making sure that you're there to be in my space to help be that comforting person. Keep me safe. That's #1 priority, that we deliver safe care and that they come in, get what they need, and then leave our hospital in the way that is appropriate. So using that, our expertise and being knowledgeable to provide that care and having an eye out. And then we're working together as a team. This is key. And number one, what patients tell us that is important, that we all seem to really like each other and enjoy working together, but we really pull together to provide care and support each other and the patient. And finally, it's champion the ministry. Why we're here, that definition that's based on our values and also on our human kindness, bringing that to the forefront and strengthening and building the relationships with each other. So that's a lot of what the patients told us was important. So, you know, from there, we sat back and said, you know, how are we going to get these principles to our way of practice across the system? How are we going to get that to the bedside and connect it to nursing and housekeeping and, you know, all the people that are at the front line? Because when you look at it, the core thing is, as an organization, we can only have an impact with the voice of the patient and the voice of the caregiver if the organization is listening. So in each hospital across our system, it matters if we're there at the bedside, if we're listening, if we're catching those stories, and if we're missing them, because patients are telling us something all the time. Caregivers are sharing their experience, whether it's in what they're telling us, what they're not telling us, in what kind of culture we see on the floor, in the kind of things that are happening around us. So it's all out there to give us information, but how are we connecting that? And that's where the impact comes. When we say this is our priority, to capture that patient experience, to capture that employee's experience and really understand from their perspective what's important and what affects them and how it can strengthen the rest of us, that's when we become effective. So then we'll kind of transition to how we can better connect that voice of the patient and the voice of the caregiver. Because together, that's where you have that magic spot. We decided to kind of filter down our approach in Southern California. That's one of the service areas within Dignity Health. And it involves 6 of our hospitals: California Medical Center in downtown Los Angeles, Community Hospital there in San Bernardino, Glendale Memorial Hospital and Healthcare Center in Glendale, and Northridge Hospital, they're in Northridge, St. Bernardine's Medical System, which is St. Bernardine's, right there in San Bernardino, and then St. Mary's Medical Center, Long Beach. So it teams together as a service area to sit back and say, okay, how are we going to really drill down and connect this a little deeper? And the team came together several ways, had lots of meetings and talks about how we can do this better. One of the largest things that had impact was Dignity Health as a whole had the Dignity Health Magical Moments Patient Experience Summit, and that was very impactful. We had hundreds of people that came together to discuss the patient experience. You had some frontline managers there, you had executive leaderships there, and everybody was totally engaged in how we could improve and connect better with our patients. Southern California then had a smaller group from all of the hospitals that were able to meet and kind of do the same work, but really drill down into how are we going to get this down to the rest of the staff. From there, we had facility summits. So we go to each hospital and have a summit there where the staff and the leaders were able to engage in how they were going to improve the patient experience, the voice of the patient, to make that difference, and then the charge nurse level. And we're going to talk about all these a little bit more. And then there's what they call the Patient Experience Collaborative, which is ongoing at different facilities that are able to really impact the ongoing performance. And then capturing the bundle at the bedside, where the nurse is there, the physician is there. You know, how are they making a difference? And what is their experience that we can share with the larger team? And with that, I just want to take a moment to pause. I've been talking for several minutes and just ask if there's any questions so far. And I know a lot of people are on mute.
Yeah, and Marian, this is Lindsay. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but if anyone would like to speak up and ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Yes. So the next slide talks about humanizing the experience. How do we make sure that our patients are seen as a person? And how do we make the work between the nurses, the physicians, the pharmacists, the technicians, all of them together? How do we have that connection and live the values we put together? So we actually had groups from each level to go through exercises around identifying specific behaviors for the experience principles. And the team was very, very excited at each of these events, talking about what kind of things we do as far as know me as a person. The eye contact was one that stood out. Shake my hand, look at me in a special way of compassion that shows me that you're paying attention. And it's directed not just toward the patient, but also toward each team member, which fosters the team angle and really has that collaboration working together. Each team was able to take that back to their work group, but it was a matter of just opening up the discussion and the dialogue and connecting the frontline staff and the charge nurses and the presidents even to what this means to them personally. That kind of got the biggest bang for the buck, because they were able to own what kind of things we would have in our culture, how we would approach our patients and our staff members. And it took kind of like a excitement of its own. And people are saying, you know, we really love these experience principles, and we can do this at our home. So it was kind of like adopting that in my house mentality. And that was the piece that was very effective. Connecting with the experience at the bedside. This is when you get to the frontline nurse that's giving care at the bedside, and our patient's voice is so significant. Just an example, as we see here, there was a nurse that was so excited for the team to meet her patient. And she was like, you have to come see. All you guys come on, this is my patient. She's really special. I'm gonna introduce you to her today. And then to get to the patient's room, you have the same kind of touch from the patient. And the patient was able to share the experience on how the nurse was explaining her medication and talking about the care she was giving, and even being so proactive as to bring a graham cracker because she knew it settled her stomach when she brought her pain medicine. And she thought that was super special. So that helped the team really look at, okay, how are we going to get this voice out to more people? Because this is one patient and, you know, one story, but how do we begin to share that a little bit further? Because, you know, often in large hospitals and systems, you know, you have a story here, a story there, and, you know, it's really significant when you share it at the meetings and so forth. But when you can have that broader impact, say when you share this to a larger team and they take these stories forward, that was the key. And being able to capture things like this on video and share it with larger teams to provide that motivation and that gratitude between each of the team members, that actually spread through the unit, so that the caregivers reported that they felt more inspired in their care, and they were able to look at how each small thing they did made a real difference. So it's opening up that dialogue, not just on a one-off basis, but really having it spread toward a larger group. And it starts with that one encounter at the bedside between the caregiver and the patient. And it also inspires that open communication and dialogue that leads better outcomes when the patients are able to understand and be part of decision-making and part of developing the plan of care on a long-term basis. So that can spread across and have a really positive effect on the care environment.
Mm-hmm. And Marianne, this is Lindsay really quick. We just had an abundance of questions come in the chat box, if that's okay. This is really great. And Emily Newberry asked, did you develop behavior standards that became how you trained new employees? And how were those standards captured?
Each of the employees go through new employee orientation that includes conversation around the experience and the behaviors connected with that. And that information is kind of standardized across the system. So everybody sees the same information when they come on board about how we work together, our mission, vision, and values, and how we live that every day. So
Great.
yes, it is standard.
Great. And then Mary asked, did you see an increase to patient or caregiver compliance?
We have, more stories have emerged from the communication with smaller groups to larger groups. And then that's one of the discussions we're going to have a little bit later about having that case study.
Mm-hmm.
But it was able to connect with other nurses, not just on one unit, but across the hospitals, because the story could be shared regularly and other people are living those behaviors. The conversations are there around basically the standards of how we live our values at Dignity Health. And part of that is not just kind of a compliance, it's an embracing, and it comes from what we call just-in-time recognition. Each of our hospitals have a form of that, how we live our values, and those employees are recognized for those specific behaviors on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So, as the leaders are rounding, you're able to give that just-in-time response and say thank you. Some of the hospitals have where you can get a cookie or a meal ticket, something like that. So it's appreciating the values that drives it more than, trying to just force the compliance, because the message comes a little different and it really empowers and engages the employees in living those values.
Wonderful. Thank you. We do have a few other questions, but I think I'll save them for a little bit later if you want to keep going.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We also had an opportunity to have a roadshow of the patient panels. And these are just everyday patients that had care at our facilities. We didn't set up like a time where they could just, kind of be coached and so forth. But each of these patients received care and shared back with the leaders, with frontline staff on how they could better improve in certain things and things they did amazingly well. And one thing that really came out was everything they went through, there was such gratitude to the caregivers that took care of them. So you think of the small things that happen along the road, the overall lesson by connecting the caregivers, the leaders, and the patients was that they were able to have a journey that ended up in a positive way. So that was the key. And that's just, having that honest conversation. That also went with the charge nurses, and the charge nurses really felt empowered when it got to their level, and that didn't just include the charge nurses, but nurses on the units that really impact and help lead the culture. But it was both positive and negative feedback. And, the negative wasn't shared in a way that they didn't do a good job, but just in a way, this is something that stuck out to me. But kindness across it all was key. One that stood out was my nurse would quietly check on me at night about every hour. It made me feel safe. And that patient, when they shared it, was actually in tears because it meant so much and they felt so vulnerable. Something else, though, that came out was the first thing I heard when I woke up from a heart surgery was about a sale going on at Marshall's. They were laughing and having a good time. So, you know, it's these things that in the back of our mind, you know, usually a nurse on the floor would just be thinking, you know, they were doing their job, you know, the patient's okay. But that stood out to a patient. So, you know, it opened a door that, you know, was so different than if, say, a nurse manager or another leader in the hospital came to tell that nurse, you know, it was really noisy last night. This moves beyond it was noisy like last night to this is how it impacted me. So that face-to-face communication made real difference. But overall, it really solidified the bond between the patients, the families, and the caregivers. Then we had so many team building exercises for the leaders around the voice of the patient, how we impact the care. And what it engendered was this genuinely enthusiastic response and the urge to go out and make a huge difference. Everybody was empowered to connect with patients, to give the best, you know, and it was just kind of enlivening moment. If you'll see in this picture, this was actually a team that was singing as, you know, they had a theme for baseball and sports around their energy toward making a difference with patients. So it's having that positive engagement that can sometimes make more of a difference than, you know, like you said, kind of just keeping people compliant, but that ongoing engagement really helps to drive that. And it's more personal. Another tool that is used, and this has been very, very, very helpful, is taking it beyond the one-offs, as I said, to having a platform where the videos and the patient stories are shared on what we call Q2. And have to say, having that media person that is able to help and foster getting the voice of the patient and recording that and have it so aligned with our mission and our ministry has made a huge difference. But having this at the fingertip of every staff member to look at, or every leader to share with across the organization has been huge, because what you can't say in words, let's say at a huddle or a staff meeting or just one-on-one when you're talking with a nurse, it really kind of gives that connection directly to a patient when you might not have a patient available right there. So it really opens up a lot of dialogue around that. So I just want to stop and, you know, just on this slide, a lot of times, you know, we can miss opportunities to connect with a patient and their families and really form that connection. But it's up to us, you know, to really stop and take a breath and really seize every opportunity. Everything in the patient's experience is important, whether it's small or large, but it's just up to us to make a difference in that. And just wanted to talk a little bit about barriers, because sometimes it's in difficult situations you have the most triumph. So you want to think about patients going through a painful moment, or the family is having a difficult time, and I don't want to intrude in that. Or I have a lot going on, and if I stop here, I don't know if I'm going to get through the rest of my day. So I have competing priorities. I have physicians calling me. I'm looking for my labs. I'm planning my day. So I'm afraid to stop and connect with the patient. And then we have to remember that a lot of our staff and people in general don't get extensive training on active listening, on empathy, on communication techniques. It's just not part of the normal training. We have some, but, you know, we've been trained far more in clinical abilities than we have in real communication. So, you know, those are just some of the barriers. And when we dig into that more, we kind of can ease the gap between the patient and the family and empower them more to have that personal connection together. And that brings us down to, you know, narrowing down to more of what can we gain from that personal story and that power of true connection, the personal level. And I'm going to share the story of Robert. Robert actually received care in one of the facilities, and he was there about 8 times, really connected to the hospital. And while he was there, he said, everything wasn't perfect, but I knew that they were committed to me. And, you know, through the 8 times, he had time in the emergency room, time on the telemetry units, the ICU, throughout the hospital. And his wife, Celeste, was there with him all the time. And she's one that was very involved in the patient's care, used her voice. And Robert actually passed away on New Year's Eve of last year. And the wife, Celeste, came back and she said, you know, I really want to do it properly and thank the people that took care of him and share all that it meant to really experience it step by step. So she made a point to come back to the hospital with the leaders and the staff. And, you know, oftentimes we found that, you know, we have leadership meetings and we share the stories there, and we share information with our leadership, but it doesn't necessarily filter out to everybody. So she was sure that she wanted to make sure that every single person that stood out to her made a difference. And she wanted to talk about what went on at the hospital through her journey. Now, when she sat there, they were surprised. She was former military in the Army, and she said that this is where she learned to be so outspoken. And she made a time to come back and sit there and talk to them. And they actually brought in the staff that were involved in this. And just looking at the story, these are caregivers throughout the hospital that took care of her. And she sat there and she talked to leaders about what they did and what it meant to her. And I just want to share a little bit about each one's story. And I'm going to start on the left. And this is Julian. Julian is one of the nurses that he referred to himself as he was connecting with the patient as an undercover do-gooder. He loves to really connect with the patients and the families and do different acts of kindness. And he was actually able to share the Super Bowl last year with Robert. And through his cares, he came back and forth as much as possible and watched the Super Bowl, and took care of Miss Celeste while he was at it. And he was sharing that she wasn't very open at first because she wasn't sure what the intent was, but as he formed a relationship, it became apparent that he knew what he was doing, and they created that true bond. And he said he just let her watch him and opened up to her so that she would have that family connection there. Next to Julian is the physician. And so often, you know, we kind of forget the physicians when we're doing recognition, but the story from the physician was key. And the key was that there came a time when there was nothing else he could do for Robert except help him make decisions. You know, there was a couple of options he could have taken, but he actually sat there at the bedside and cried. And that's what Miss Celeste said really touched her, that he cared enough, that he was human enough, that it affected him when he couldn't affect his patient any longer. And when the doctor came and saw her that day, he didn't know she was going to be there. But again, the tears came, and just the gratitude of being able to care for the patient. Miss Celeste is there in the middle, and then we have Angie, who helped the patient while he was outside of the hospital each time to navigate through what the discharge instructions were, that kind of thing. And then we have Jason next to her, who is the person, the respiratory therapist that came in, sat with him no matter what, was there for the family as well. and said that it was just his true conviction that he was supposed to be there to connect with that patient. But he said, I do it with all my patients. And that was the overwhelming story from everyone. And finally, we come to the valet, and this is Francis. And he is one of the valet members that stopped Miss Celeste when she came in very worried about having surgery, her husband having surgery that day. And he just stopped her and said, do you mind if we pray with you today? And she said, yes. And she said she was so overwhelmed that each time she came, they took care of her, but just for them to be so attuned and so open to really going to that next level and caring for her. So this is the team that brought the voice back. And from this, Miss Celeste, she said this is her new ministry now. This is her mission. And her motto was that if I could just help one, I'll make a difference. And as a result, she's become a part of the Voice of the Patient at that facility and come to Patient Family Advisory Council so she can be a part of making a difference at the hospital on an ongoing basis. And not just at that hospital, but giving feedback to the team overall. So it's really taking that overall team approach and drilling it down to the level of how do we make that personal connection through gratitude, through humanity, to really elevate the voice of the patient. And that is where the magic moment came of sparking that between the team and everyone else. And it has made a difference across the facility, both with the culture and with the HCAHPS, which measures our patient experience, kind of our report card. And the service area has continued to improve over baseline from previous fiscal years. So it's that connection that continues to help drive that. But really, it humbles one to be a part of the connection every single day. And I just want to stop on that note and really appreciate the one voice. And this is only one voice and one story among many, but just reconnecting the patient and the caregiver and the magic that that generates, not just in a small area, but to the whole facility, to the whole caregiving process. And with that, Lindsay, I can have questions if you have any.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marion, for sharing the incredible work at Dignity and this inspirational story of this kind of relationship that these caregivers had with the patient and their family. That's truly shows all of the amazing work that your organization and effort that your organization has put into the patient experience. So congratulations on that. We do have some wonderful conversations going on about that entire patient experience in the chat, but I will touch on the questions that I missed a little bit earlier for you, Marion, if you don't mind. The first from Pauline Anton: does Dignity Health do patient roundings, whether you have an advisory council that does patient roundings or patient and family members who do patient roundings?
We have different levels of rounding. Mm-hmm. The patient advisory councils don't all go out on the floor, but they are involved in projects that are going on at the facilities. So let's say that Ms. Celeste is there, and because she had the information there with ballet or with respiratory therapy or with nursing, she would be there to connect with a lot of the staff mm-hmm. on the floor mm-hmm. and not rounding on patients.
I see. Great. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to go back in the chat and find them. Okay. This one is from Joe. How do the trustees and top managers of the organization demonstrate their support and commitment to use these wonderful concepts that you've presented?
That's the joy of it. The actual people that support this opportunity, and not just this opportunity, but the voice across the organization, comes from the senior leaders. Mm-hmm. When I spoke of the Patient Experience Summit in Southern California, that was the first patient panel that we had. And it was so significant that the person who led it was our senior service area VP, our service area physician executive, and different members of the senior leadership team. That really was the support that provided that platform and made it just important to the team that we're going to hear the voice of the patient. That's where we're going to get our money from. And at each of the organizations, that's been mirrored throughout. That each one of them are committed to having real patients. And, you know, because sometimes, you know, you had previously where people would kind of have people that are prepped and want to just come tell us everything is wonderful and go home.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have people that have an open voice, and all of the leaders, when they come with the frontline staff, the senior leaders, they're all together in a team, and they can actually ask the patients questions one-on-one besides panel questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the patients are able to be very candid. And like I said, they don't only tell you, oh, you're all perfect. You know, there's no real value in that. That's very motivational, but it doesn't give you the money you need. So it's giving that open dialogue, but having the support from the top is key.
Great. Completely agree. Leadership buy-in is what is needed to do this work. So Charlene asks, how comments, observations, concerns accepted from patients, surveyed directly, and how are these shared with the entire staff? Meaning healthcare professionals, housekeeping, kitchen staff, and maintenance. And I know, Charlene, you had an experience that could illustrate or that could clarify your question. Would you like to speak up, Charlene?
Charlene may be on
might
mute.
Be on mute, yeah. Actually, I don't see her on anymore. Oh, there's
okay.
Oh, I see her, but I don't know if she has sound. But okay.
I can answer.
Okay, yeah, if you can answer, that'd be great.
We have several layers of rounding. We have, of course, leadership rounding, which we use a daily sacred hour where leaders go out and round on patients and then gather at debrief. And that's a daily process so that we can resolve issues in real time and do any service recovery that's necessary. From there, those issues are driven out to the staff level so that they know, and the positive recognition comes from there, as well as the feedback of where we had opportunity. And that is encouraged to be a very transparent process. We also have what we call huddles, where the leaders can share the information to their own staff. We have senior leader rounding that goes out and works with employees. And we have a human resources team as well as our executive leadership team that go out and talk to the staff and share the insights and also get their feedback. And that's how we get that kind of information. We have the town halls where the stories, the comments are given back to the staff, are trending now. Well, not trending now, but we have a weekly e-newsletter that goes out at each facility that shares information about the employees' experience and comments and that kind of thing. And that goes out to the general population. And we also have one for our physicians that go out as well. And then, you know, at every staff meeting, we have it captured in some videos. All that's direct information, but we also have our comments, our verbatims from Press Ganey that we are able to share as well. And we share that by department sometimes. Let's say I want to look at cleanliness and quietness to share with certain teams, both with nursing and EVS. We can share that directly with the teams as well.
Great. So many different outlets, it sounds like, to spread the word.
Yeah, and it's transparent as well. You know, we like to share directly what the voice of the patient was, not our interpretation of it, because it might not be exactly what the patient meant. You know, we want to have it as much in their words as possible.
Great. That's wonderful. Okay, and then we have a question from Erica Goyer asking, how do you talk about the negative interactions that happen in a way that empowers the staff instead of shaming them? She also notes that she just had a personal experience during her father's hospitalization that was troubling. How do you share negative feedback with the staff in a way that will lead to improvement?
I think that's the big thing that comes from having that decrease in a barrier between the patients and the frontline staff. So it's very candid, and we have a balance. I mean, we don't want to share 6 things that were very bad and, leave the impression that everything was negative, but we don't want to have the same thing on the other side. It sounds like everything was positive. Want to make sure that, let's say I'm a family member or a manager of a nursing unit that's sharing, I can share the whole experience and present the things that were positive and, where I thought would have been most helpful. And we like to use the response, what would have comforted me better or made my journey easier would have been if it had gone this way. But not taking away that this was disturbing to me. This is how it made me feel. And this is the impact it had, because that's what we as caregivers need to hear. So I wouldn't take away the fact that it was an experience that wasn't all positive, but really to kind of balance it to say the whole thing wasn't just an awful thing, your hospital's awful, but this was very disturbing for me. And that's where we have to be brave as organizations to hear that. We can't just be open to hearing the positive and not the negative. And a lot of times that's what we kind of want to brush past it and move on, but it's not possible. We have to have the whole picture and to be honest with ourselves.
Yep, it's very true and hard to do for a lot of organizations. So Emily Newberry, she asks, how do you support your patient partners organizationally? Do you have staff who bring them on board to develop tools, part of orientation? How are your patient partners utilized in your organization?
Is that onboarding them or once they're there? I can answer both.
Let's go with both.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have several ways that we recruit our patients that become a part of our team. Because some of them are for different reasons. Some people are willing to sign on to a long-term. Some of them it's part of the journey that they get to, and some may only be able to give you a certain amount of their feedback. But we look for each one, and the patient family advisory councils and people that want to share are asked, basically. We have cards when we do leader rounding and that kind of thing that ask them to be a part of the people that give us feedback, and that we truly value that. They're onboarded just as volunteers are for the hospital, so that they're able to really interact and have full training around things like HIPAA protection, protecting yourself from infection and that kind of thing. So, they get the basic orientation. And then as they are out, our patient experience leaders are usually the most connected to the patient and family advisors, as well as different people that we bring into organization. They're always there to support. And the leaders, of course, have been really phenomenal in supporting the people that volunteer and share their time with us and their stories. And they share the information back to other of their staff meeting members and other leaders. So they're definitely supported across the organization. And like I said, the patient experience teams at each of the facilities are always key in supporting them.
And so Emily asked, I think she clarified her question. Do you use your patient family advisors in other ways in addition to your advisory council?
We will usually, when they are there, we provide them with lunch. We don't have any kind of I don't think monetary compensation for that, but things like parking with the valet systems, lunch while they're there, if they're doing work for that day, meal tickets and all of that, that's given. And I mean, I would love to hear more if somebody else is giving other incentives.
Yeah, I think the question might be, do you have maybe quality improvement initiatives going on at your organization that patient family advisors are a part of, or other projects that they're integrated into, just any work outside of the council? Or is that kind of what you're referring to? You don't have a way. Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. We do have processes that we present to them before we roll them out. I mean, so many times things are done before we get the view of the patient, and it doesn't work. So we give them that opportunity ahead of time to let the patients and the families give us feedback. Things like leader rounding, their voice is very important on how we carry out our visits and our mission, that kind of thing. Performance improvement at places like our patient experience collaboratives is key, because that's where the real work happens on how you're going to improve in certain areas. So when they're participating there, they're part of the team effort that's working on the process.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, and I completely agree. I think a lot of the time, in terms of the input that patient family advisors have, or patient family advisory councils, sometimes it's a lot of checking in with after the work has been completed, like you mentioned. So for advisors, being able to, at least have a voice before projects or processes are completed. But I think we're really moving toward a space where we can have patient family advisors informing work, projects, processes, et cetera, from the beginning. So that's something really excited to work towards as well.
One thing
yeah.
say, Lindsay, is one of the keys in getting this all going is making sure that the advisors knows it's a safe place. It's not just the advisors, anybody that's giving us feedback.
Right.
And I thought back to the previous question of how it would feel to share the negative impact of the patient story. But the patients that come back, you can't pay for the kind of feedback that they give.
Right.
Because it's parent, it's a great opportunity. And there has to be, from the top down, that feeling and the expectation set that this is a safe zone. We want to hear you speak. It's valuable to us, whether it's positive or negative. And you should feel free to do that. It's our privilege to hear it. So I think creating that safe zone is part of setting up a successful program where patients and family voices are amplified. If that's not there, then they can't be transparent. And you don't want that feeling that they can't really tell the truth. And it should be stated that we appreciate you being honest with us. That's what we need, because we want to provide care. Most of the people that participate in any of the groups do it, and they say it's because we want everybody to receive the kind of care we want our family member to. Or if it was a negative event, we don't want that to happen to anybody else. And the gentleman that shared the information about hearing the sale at Marshall's was very vocal about that, because he said, I absolutely love this care. I had the best nurses. It was wonderful. But the reason I say that is because that stood out to me, and I would want somebody else that was waking up and, you're not quite yourself. You have a tube down your throat, you're kind of disoriented and you can't move. But the first thing that came to him was hearing. And he said he knew how that felt, and he wanted to make sure that that didn't happen to other people. So he asked the nurses to actually team up with him to make sure that it was a better experience for people overall. So that expectation has to be put there right up front.
Great. And I'm glad you brought that up because we've had some interesting conversation going on in chat about that. We weren't sure if the patient had thought that that was a good thing, that people around him were having some light conversation, or a little bit stressful that he woke up to that conversation and not really knowing what was going on, if he was okay. So I was going to ask about that and kind of your perspective on that, because as you could see in the conversation, we have people on both sides of the spectrum of really appreciating the fact that that those conversations wouldn't be happening, and those people aren't going on with their day-to-day lives as you might be having one of the worst day of your lives and coming out of a surgery and not knowing what's going on. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum of having people around you who are acting more normal and having you feel more okay with being disconnected from the outside world, which is kind of how I was feeling. But yeah, that thank you for clarifying that.
And that was the thing that they said, they felt that it would have been more helpful for them to be there helping him, knowing that he was coming around. That was what the patient shared, And like I said, I've heard, like you said, both sides, but I just thought it was significant that the patient thought that that was the one thing to share,
right,
that could have been an opportunity in the major overall, just being grateful for the whole experience.
Right. And it's incredible, those small little pieces that you can take out of that entire experience that could really change your organization and how patients wake up from surgeries, So that's great. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. So if there is anyone, we've had some wonderful conversations. So thank you everyone for participating in the chat. But with the few minutes that we have left, is there one or two more questions for Marian? Anyone who would like to speak up? Okay, well, it seems, actually you have one more question that popped into chat from Erica, and we'll take this question and then we will wrap up. So for you, Marian, Erica asks, how do you sustain your counsel? She's seen so many fizzle out.
I think one of the most important things is continuing to add fresh participation and having, because when you have people that have been on the council about 6 months or so, it's good to bring in somebody that can have a fresh perspective with maybe a new experience. And the second thing is really to have something incredible for them to work on. The most important thing, and hearing from them, is they're aligned with the ministry. So it's important for them to really make a difference and to connect with the staff and the other patients there, to really feel like they're part of the family and that what the work they're doing is important.
I would completely agree to Marian. We work with a lot of organizations who are developing advisory councils, and we see the main piece of sustainment is, like you said, connecting the work of the advisory council to what's really important at the organization as well. So in both ways, the advisors can see how they're having an impact at the organization, and on the other side, the organization can see directly how the advisors are informing the work of the council. So that was perfectly said. Okay, well, we have just 1 minute left, so I would like to wrap up and thank Marian so much for sharing your incredible work at Dignity Health. Here at PFCC Partners, we share so much about the advisory council, like you can kind of see from the questions, and patient family advisors. And this was really beneficial of focusing on that patient experience. And so I want to thank you for sharing the wonderful work at Dignity Health and this personal experience as well. It has been really eye-opening, and I would like to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thanks again for having me.
Great. Of course, we are so appreciative to have you. And I would also like to thank everyone who participated in today's workshop. Thank you for all of your questions and participation in chat. We hope to see you here again next month. And this recording will actually be available on our website by next week as well if you want to rewatch it and learn some more. So thank you, everyone, and have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.